Coincidences have had a bad reputation in science. After all, they occur independently, right? When you meet a friend randomly on the street after thinking about them randomly in the morning, that's a coincidence. When you get a surprise call from a parent when you need them the most. Coincidence, right? But what if you see something in your dream, and that exact thing appeared in real life during that day? Coincidence again, right? We are quick to discard many of these instances as coincidence, a product of chance. Even if you and your parents hadn't talked for months, that phone call was just a coincidence. Even if the object you saw in your dreams was exotic and had almost no chance of appearing in front of you that day, it was a coincidence, right? There is no actual meaning behind these events, right? But what if there really is some meaning? What if there is something at work here that made these events coincide with each other? That would be crazy. And what if I tell you that there is actually a name for this phenomenon? And that this concept has been put forward by one of the most revered and pioneering scholars in psychology? Well, as it turns out, we're in luck. This phenomenon is known as synchronicity. It is an exotic word with a somewhat exotic meaning behind it. More than half a century ago, a young troubled woman came to a psychiatrist for treatment. She was rational, she was very logical. In fact, as the therapist put it, she was psychologically unavailable owing to the fact that she practiced logical and rational thinking to the extreme. So much that the therapist was finding it very hard to connect on a therapeutic level. One day, she came into the room where the sessions were usually conducted. She told the doctor about a dream that she had on the previous night. She said that she had dreamt about someone gifting her a piece of jewelry. This jewelry was in the shape of a golden scarab beetle. Right at that time, seemingly unprovoked, a large flying insect flew in through the open window. The therapist grabbed it and presented it to the patient. "Here is your scarab beetle," he said. And there it was, sitting in the palm of his hand. Absolutely out of nowhere. Or is it absolutely out of nowhere? The psychiatrist in the story above was Carl Jung, one of the most celebrated physicians of the 20th century. And the excerpt is from his 1961 book, Synchronicity and a Causal Connecting Principle. Carl Jung presented the idea of synchronicity in the 1920s. Since then, he has offered many definitions of the word. He defined synchronicity, most simply, as the meaningful coincidence of two or more events where something other than the probability of chance is involved. And he used the story of his very rational patient to illustrate his point. However, to understand the concept of synchronicity, it is important to understand Jung just a little bit more. Throughout his life, Jung had many encounters which fascinated him. Due to his profession, he was in close contact with many of the people he treated. Following Sigmund Freud's approach to therapy, he delved into his clients' dreams and everyday doings. And he started noticing that more than a few of his patients reported incidents happening at the most opportune of times, seemingly for no real cause. But they fit into the narratives of their lives seamlessly. One of his patients was the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli. Pauli had complex dreams, but he was not careless enough to discard their value. And so Jung, his therapist, and Pauli discussed this phenomenon in great detail. They maintained their correspondence for a very long time. However, it took them about 2 decades to publish this idea of synchronicity. He noted in his book, A Causal Connecting Principle, "As a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, I have often come up against phenomena in question and could convince myself how much these inexperiences meant to my patients. In most cases, they were things which people do not talk about for fear of exposing themselves to thoughtless ridicule. I was amazed to see how many people have had experiences of this kind. and how carefully the secret was guarded. But now, let us make some sense of synchronicity. There are many valid questions. Some of them are, but how can coincidences be meaningful? Don't they happen by chance? Does Jung not understand that things might simply happen because of chance? Here is the thing though. Jung did understand and accept chance. He did agree that many coincidences might simply be a result of chance. However, there are some times when coincidences pile up, so much that it seems ridiculous that the coincidences are happening independently. It happens to everyone sooner or later. A certain number pops up whenever you go. An old friend you haven't seen in 20 years since high school appears the same day you're looking at her picture in a yearbook. You're singing a song and turn on the radio and the same song is playing, said Thomas Robb in the Arizona Republic in 1999. These are examples of synchronicity. As Jung explained, what I found were the so-called coincidences, which were so connected so meaningfully that their so-called chance concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical figure. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised if you, the viewer, had just fleetingly recalled an incident like that. If you have, write it down in the comments. What Jung proposes might be preposterous to those who follow a very empirical approach. However, the concept of synchronicity has been present in religion for millennia. Across almost every faith, we can see a mutual understanding that everything is interconnected. Some consider that this is how the divine intervenes. But how can we conciliate with this explanation? How can the empirical scientists and philosophers simply accept anything as supernatural as divine intervention? In the beginning of this video, we talked about a very rational but troubled woman who had dreamt of the beetle-shaped jewelry. We had gone over how Jung grabbed an insect and presented the exact beetle she was referring to. But what happened after this event could give us some insight. From that point on, according to Jung, it seemed as if his patient was finally unlocked. And that is the point from where she became more accepting of others' ideas. What synchronicity offers, along with the religions describing it before, is a way to look at events as meaningful. Interestingly, one of the major aspects of depression is the feeling of meaninglessness. But who gives everything around us some meaning? Who is responsible for linking narratives together? Who gives meaning to life? The answer? We do. We give meaning to life. Through our ideas, our beliefs, through the experiences we have gathered and the events which changed our life. And because we give meaning to life, all occurrences fall into place in our narratives. And this is why synchronicity has a very valid argument for how popular it is as a concept. There certainly is a lot of meaning to these seemingly unrelated events. Even if these occurrences aren't knowingly linked together, they are still linked to our story of life. They still hold some meaning to us. Just as how many religions consider these moments to be messages, we can also look at them in the same way. Think about it. With an example, the fact that you were thinking about someone and they just texted you out of the blue tells you something. It shows you that others might think about you enough to contact you. Your feeling of elation at their text or call tells you how you feel about them. And most of all, it tells you that sometimes things that you like or dislike could appear out of nowhere. Thus, it allows you to broaden your way of looking at the world. That is probably one of the reasons why the patient was able to finally connect with Jung, her therapist. Perhaps it was the surprise factor. Perhaps she really did start believing in miracles. But in any case, finding meaning between her dream and the insect in the palm of Jung's hand helped her. And is that so bad? This feeling of wonder, of being fascinated, is something which the world is losing. Especially in the West, where we prefer to be as rational as possible, even though at our core we are far from rational. So maybe it really is a supernatural being. Maybe it is the stars aligning. Maybe it is just probable events coming together at the right time. Whatever the case, we cannot deny that these patterns hold meaning. They are meaningful to us. They give us important insights. They create a connection between the physical world and our consciousness. Or is our consciousness learning the patterns of the physical world and pointing out things to us before they happen? How do you interpret Jung's synchronicity?